Hello, clever people, and welcome to our review, our first shared review in quite a while for Dunkirk. Connor, what is this movie about?
Dunkirk is based on a true story. It's about in England, there are 400,000 soldiers that were trapped on a beach, and they were saved by civilian boats from a nearby town.
Yeah, it's a fairly simple premise because the story in real life was not that complex. And actually, the movie itself is fairly simple. There's not a lot of character development, there's not a lot of complexity in the plot. It mostly follows just these characters as they are trying to survive. Now, that was a very risky decision by Christopher Nolan because not having development is weird for a movie. But honestly, I think that this paid off, and I think that this was one of the best movies of the year.
I agree.
Yeah, it's honestly, I don't think I've seen a movie in theaters in a long time that was as intense or as gripping as this movie. Each time that I saw it, because I saw it twice, once in 70mm, once in Cinemark XD, and each time I went up in my chair, I got to the edge of it because I wanted to get closer to the screen, because I wanted it to just go by so that I could see each event happen, see how each character is influenced by what happens. This movie is so unbelievably intense, and I believe that has a lot to do with Christopher Nolan. The direction in this movie is impeccable.
So Christopher Nolan's a great director. I have only seen 3 of his films, this, The Dark Knight, and Inception, and I would probably say that this is his best. He did a fantastic job in this movie.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that Memento is really close to there, but honestly, just this movie is like, it's an experience. See, when I did my review for The Godfather just a little bit ago, I mentioned something that I say only really the best movies can do. Movies like A Brighter Summer Day, or movies like The Godfather, where it goes beyond just being an experience, and it starts sort of becoming reality. Like, as you're watching it, you don't really care about where it started, where it ends. You sort of just feel like you're watching real life, like you're a fly on the wall. And that's what they definitely did in these situations. And I think something that really helped with the intensity in a lot of the gripping scenes was the score. It was done by Hans Zimmer, and a lot of it was very simple, but I thought it was very effective.
Yeah, I agree. The score was very well done. Sometimes I have listened to Hans Zimmer scores that are not the best. Amazing Spider-Man 2. Yeah. But most of the time he does a decent job, but this I was really impressed. I thought he did a fantastic job with this movie.
Yeah, and I think that does lead me into one of my issues where I think that in certain scenes the score was a tad overbearing, but honestly that's just like a couple scenes. This is a rare type of movie where I really don't have too many problems with it. A lot of it is honestly just so fantastic, so well thought out, so well directed. When people think of style in movies, they think Wes Anderson or Jean-Luc Godard. They think about like really stylish movies with bright colors and bright characters. But Christopher Nolan shows that you can also have style that isn't just like that. The style in this movie is achieved through the intensity, and a lot of the sound editing and mixing, it's gonna win the Academy Award already. I'm gonna say that now with confidence, because this movie would not be as fantastic without some of the absolutely amazing sound choices.
And back to Nolan's directing, it did a thing that most directors try to accomplish, and a lot of movies try to do it, and they fail. But I thought he did a fantastic job with the editing because he basically had 3 different subplots instead of just one main plot and like one other subplot or 2 other subplots. He did 3 separate subplots, and they all kind of went together, but it would hop from one to the next. And I thought the transitions were fantastically done, and it was like a TV show. I was like hooked. I was like, oh my god, I can't wait to see this boat thing happen again.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that the editing was honestly absolutely amazing. Again, I think Academy Award talk, when the Academy Awards roll around, I think that this will be a high contender for editing, because the way that they form each and every subplot, how they intertwine with each other in ways that were honestly just fascinating. I wanted to know more and more about each of these subplots, and honestly, I don't think that development ruined it at all, because the main theme of the movie is survival. It's wanting to be able to live through an awful situation. And I remember a lot of the characters, but the characters weren't a part of the movie. The main focus on it was the directing. This is a director's movie.
Yeah.
And Christopher Nolan did honestly one of the best jobs of the year. I do believe that he will get nominated for Best Director. I think that this movie has heavy Oscar chance. And honestly, I love also how this movie doesn't have forced patriotism. Because in a lot of movies, like Michael Bay movies, like 13 Hours, there's characters that sit down, they're like, oh yeah, I have kids at home, and I'm fighting out here because I feel obligated to fight for them. They don't have that. The ending is a little cheesy. I mean, when he's reading the newspaper and there's the big brawling music, it's a little bit cheesy, but it's the type of patriotism that's actually effective, that affects the plot and affects the characters and makes for something really strong. For a lot of the movie, there's no really siding with either or, because that's not what happens during war. In war, it's all about death. It's when you get home. It's when you see those people and you realize that's when you feel patriotism. That's when you feel proud for your country for having gotten over something grand. And I really like how Christopher Nolan implemented that.
Yeah, there have been a lot of movies I've seen recently. I can't think of a movie that was patriotic, that was not like, oh my god, you're supposed to look at this, oh my god, look at these people, they've got kids, oh my god, they have jobs, they're working for their families and stuff like that, like Patriots Day. Yeah. It's like, yeah, we get it, they're people. And it did a really good job because, again, it didn't really develop him that much, so it didn't have to go, I have a wife and kid at home, or I have a family and stuff like that. And while the ending was a bit cheesy, I thought that the newspaper scene was very effective and very emotional.
Cheesy can be okay if you're also being effective at the same time. And I think Christopher Nolan does that. And I also like, I mentioned intense a lot, but the other word that you have to use with this movie is brutal. Characters die without really knowing what's going on. Particularly a scene where there's a kid in the water and he swims up and he gets caught in a fire and I'm pretty sure he dies. It doesn't show it, but I'm pretty sure he dies. And that was really, really strong. Just knowing that in every single war there's always people that just randomly die. There's nothing they can do about it and it's just what happens. It pulled no punches, it showed all the brutality and at the same time made for such an engrossing and investing experience.
Talking about the intensity, there are some scenes, there's a lot of drowning in the movie, and there are a couple of scenes where just the water's filling up a ship or a plane or something. Yeah. And there was one scene, it was like a 2-minute take of this plane crash, and the guy in it is trying to get out, and he can't get out, and it was extremely gripping. I loved it.
Yeah, and another scene I think was also really great was the scene where they're in the bottom of the ship. And you saw it in the trailer, bullets start coming through, and the people start freaking out. That was a great side of war. We've never seen that side of war before, where they start tearing each other apart. It doesn't just explore the fact that war sucks, people die. It goes to so many other lengths and so many different facets to it. And honestly, the lack of an R rating I don't think hurt it at all. The violence, it was still very harsh and very sad. And honestly, I think this is a horror movie. I would consider it a horror movie. Not a movie about the horrors of war, but a straight-up horror movie because of how gripping and sad and emotional and honestly devastating it is. It isn't your traditional sense of horror, but honestly, I would consider it as that.
I wouldn't necessarily call it a horror movie because it isn't necessarily scary. However, I would call it a war thriller.
Yeah. I think that it's one of the most, like, it borders horror, it straddles the line between thriller and horror really well. And honestly, I think I can confidently say that Dunkirk is my third favorite film of the year. It was number 2, but we saw another movie we'll be reviewing later. But honestly, I think that this movie was fantastic. I think that it is almost an instant classic. Everyone's talking about it, everyone loves it. It's not like a correct saying to use because instant classic, that's an oxymoron. Yeah. Like instant, that's just not what a classic is. It's after 20, 30 years that a movie gets to be well known. But when there's certain times when you can just tell a movie will become a classic, and I think Dunkirk is a classic example of it.
So yeah, Dunkirk is my 5th favorite film of the year, but this year has been simultaneously the best year for movies and the worst year for movies. Yeah. I have 5 10 out of 10s for this year, this included, that I absolutely love, and 5 less than half a star.
Yeah.
Like 5 of them that I would consider to be some of the worst of all time. So yeah, but Dunkirk was fantastic.
Yeah, I don't think that this, I have a hard time considering one of the best years for film because we haven't really gone through it yet, but I think that this is definitely one of the most consistent films. You have in theaters right now, The Big Sick, A Ghost Story, Dunkirk, And it comes at night. It's still in a few theaters. And there's one more that I'm forgetting.
Baby Driver.
But Baby Driver, yes. And also a lot of people loved War for the Planet of the Apes, which is also out in theaters. I enjoyed it. I didn't love it, but still a lot of people did. Honestly, this is one of the best times, I think, for movies right now. It's a great time to be a cinephile, and Dunkirk helps solidify that. That is why I will give it a 9 out of 10.
I will give it a 10 out of 10.
Alright, that concludes our review for Dunkirk. Connor, anything else to say?
No, if you have any thoughts on Christopher Nolan's filmography or on this film, comment below.
And just let us know, and that concludes our review. I am Robert Burke.
And I'm Connor Gilbert.
And this has been The Clever Critics. Goodbye.